After 5 years together, my fiancé said he wasn't sure. But I made sure he'd regret it forever. After 5 years together, my fiancé Steve hit me with the ultimate gut punch. He looked me in the eyes and said he wasn't sure he even wanted to marry me. And just to make it sting even worse, he turned to his friends and said, if she were prettier, I'd be more excited to tie the knot. Like it was some kind of joke. This morning, his mom, Mel, called me in tears. And let me tell you, Mel does not cry easily. If she's crying, it means something serious is going down. Steve and I had been together for a little over 5 years. We'd been engaged for 8 months. We met at a friend's housewarming party. Just two people bonding over a shared hatred of IPAs and a love for old-school 90s cartoons. It was casual, easy. One of those nights that just turns into everything.
We dated for a year, moved in together after 2, adopted a cat named Beans in year 3, and last summer, he proposed. It wasn't anything over the top, just a Saturday morning hike to our favorite lookout point. He was so nervous he almost dropped the ring box, trying to pull it out of his jacket pocket. I said yes before he could even get the words out. We set the date for October and started planning. Well, I started planning. He just nodded a lot and scrolled through his phone. Honestly, I didn't mind doing most of the work, at first. But about 3 months ago, Steve started acting strange. Not outright rude or anything, just weirdly hesitant about stuff. Whenever I showed him a venue, he'd say things like, "That's a lot of money for one day," or "Do we really need to invite all those people?" I figured it was just normal guy stuff. Budget stress, commitment nerves. Then he started taking longer to respond to texts about wedding stuff. I'd send him options for caterers, and he'd reply hours later with, "Looks fine," or "Whatever you want." It wasn't just the words. It was the energy. The vibe was off.
The red flags didn't all hit at once. They came slow, almost quiet. At first, it was the way Steve started lagging on his replies. I'd send him texts about wedding stuff, caterers, playlists, seating charts, and hours would go by. When he finally responded, it'd be something half-hearted like, "Looks fine," or "Whatever you want." No effort, no input. Like he was doing me a favor, just replying. When I asked if everything was okay, he brushed it off. Said work had gotten crazy. His construction company was juggling some major projects. And for a while, I believed it. It sounded reasonable. Then he started hanging out more with Brent, one of the guys from work. They'd grab beers after hours, watch whatever game was on, just chill at Brent's place. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, but suddenly he was out more nights than he was in. When he did come home, he barely said 2 words to me. He was always checking his phone, always somewhere else mentally. The guy who used to pull me into his lap and kiss my shoulder while I cooked dinner now acted like I was a roommate he barely tolerated. I talked to Molly about it, my best friend from college. She told me it was probably pre-wedding nerves and suggested we take a night for ourselves, just us. So I made plans. I booked a table at this new Italian spot downtown, put on a dress I hadn't worn in forever, curled my hair, and even bought his favorite beer to keep cold in the fridge for when we got back. It was a complete train wreck. Steve was distant all through dinner. He barely talked. He wasn't even pretending to try. And then, right as I started talking about locking down our honeymoon plans, he hit me with it. Said he wasn't sure if he was ready. Not just for the honeymoon, not just the wedding. He meant all of it. Us, marriage, everything. I stared at him like I was in a bad dream. 5 years together, 8 months engaged, and now suddenly he didn't know? When I asked him what changed, he brought up some conversations he'd had with Brent, how marriage ruins things, how Brent's brother's divorce had been ugly and expensive. He was spiraling and pulling me down with him. I tried not to make a scene, but inside I was falling apart. Neither of us touched our food. The ride home felt like being trapped in a pressure cooker. He didn't say a word, just sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was holding him together. When we got back, he didn't even try to talk more, just mumbled something about needing to think and passed out on the couch. The next morning, we moved around the apartment like two people stuck in a shared Airbnb. No conversation, no eye contact, just tension so thick I could feel it in my bones. He told me he was heading to the Rusty Nail to catch the game with Brent and a few guys from work. I didn't have it in me to care. I just nodded and let him walk out the door. The truth was, I was too exhausted, emotionally, mentally, to argue or even pretend I was okay.
Later that afternoon, Molly called and basically staged a rescue mission. She told me to put on shoes, grab my purse, and meet her for coffee. I did. Because, honestly, sitting alone in that apartment felt like suffocating. When we got to the cafe, she didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, waiting for me to open up. And once I did, I couldn't stop. I told her everything. Steve's cold shoulder, how he barely looked at me anymore, how our date night had fallen apart before it even started. She let me vent, then gently suggested maybe he was just going through some last-minute groom panic. Maybe the pressure was getting to him. After we finished our coffee, we walked around Target. It's kind of my default coping mechanism. Something about the bright lights and shelves full of useless stuff calms me down. I bought a couple throw pillows I didn't need, a new shampoo I probably won't even like, but it gave me something to hold on to, something that wasn't falling apart. By early evening, I was starting to feel a little steadier. I told Molly I'd be fine and headed home. But right as I pulled into the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Kyler, one of Steve's co-workers. I'd only met him once at the company Christmas party. The message just said, "Hey, are you okay? Things got weird at the Rusty Nail." My stomach dropped. I called him right away. I couldn't wait for a reply. When he picked up, he sounded awkward, like he didn't want to talk. But I pressed, and finally, he told me what happened. The guys had been teasing Steve about the wedding, asking if he was really committed to one woman forever. Steve, drunk and acting like a jackass, apparently said, if she were hotter, I'd be more excited to get married. Then laughed like it was the funniest thing ever. Kyler said a few of the guys called him out, but Steve just brushed it off, said they couldn't take a joke. I sat in my car, crying like a kid. 20 minutes, maybe longer. The man I'd been with for 5 years just turned me into a punchline in front of his buddies? Because I wasn't pretty enough? When I finally walked into the apartment, Steve was passed out on the couch in the same clothes he left in. The whole place reeked of cheap beer and sweat. I didn't say a word, just grabbed beans and locked myself in the bedroom. Sunday morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee. His usual pathetic peace offering. He looked like hell, sitting there in yesterday's hoodie, hoping breakfast would erase what happened. I wasn't having it. When I told Steve what Kyler had said, he froze. His face just dropped. Then he went straight into damage control, claimed he was drunk, said it was stupid, tried to laugh it off like it was nothing.
According to him, the guys had been on his case all night, teasing him about getting married, calling him whipped, and in some desperate move to shut them up, he said something dumb. That was his excuse. Just guys being guys. That only made it worse. I couldn't believe he was trying to play it off like some harmless locker room talk. We argued hard. I asked him how he could sit there and humiliate me in front of his friends like I was some joke. He kept insisting it wasn't what he meant, that he never wanted to hurt me. He said he'd been stressed, wedding bills, pressure from work, all of it piling up. But none of that excused turning my looks into the punchline of a bar night roast. I couldn't stay in the apartment. I couldn't even look at him. I grabbed my purse, packed a bag, and drove straight to Ross's place. My brother has always been my anchor. When I walked through his door and told him everything, he was livid. He looked ready to drive over and put Steve through a wall. I had to beg him to let it go. Told him I just needed a place to breathe while I figured out what the hell came next. Steve texted all day Sunday. Apologies. Can we talk? I messed up. Please come home. I only answered once. Told him I needed time. I couldn't bring myself to go to work on Monday. There was no way I could sit at that front desk at the dental office and pretend everything was normal. So I called in sick and stayed curled up on Ross's futon, replaying everything over and over until I thought my brain would snap. Then, around 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mel, Steve's mom. We've always had a good relationship. Honestly, she's been more supportive of me than my own mom, who lives in Florida with her third husband and barely checks in unless it's a holiday. Mel sounded off, shaken. She said Steve had called her the night before, and there was something I needed to know. Something big. She didn't want to say it over the phone, asked if I could meet her somewhere to talk. So that's where I am now, sitting in my car, parked outside a little coffee shop downtown, 15 minutes before I'm supposed to meet Mel. I'm staring at my engagement ring, wondering if I missed the signs, wondering if I've been living in a fantasy, and it all just cracked open overnight. What the hell could she possibly tell me that would make any of this make sense? For those who've been asking, yes, I did meet with Mel, Steve's mom. I'll explain that in a minute. But first, the last 2 days have been a whirlwind, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything. After I made the post on Monday, I called in sick again. My boss didn't give me any trouble. I've barely taken time off all year, and I must have sounded like I was about to break down right there on the phone. I spent the entire morning hiding in Ross's spare room, which is basically a storage unit with a sad twin bed. I just laid there, doom scrolling through comments, trying to make sense of anything.
Around noon, Molly showed up with sandwiches from that little deli near the hospital. I hadn't eaten more than 2 saltines since Sunday. But she sat next to me, opened the bag, and handed me half a turkey melt like it was medicine. I didn't even want food, but I forced myself to eat something. Molly didn't say much, just reminded me softly, "You can't avoid him forever. You two live together. You've got accounts and furniture and a damn cat." She wasn't wrong. And with Ross's girlfriend coming over later for their usual Taco Tuesday, I really didn't want to be the sad wreck in the corner ruining dinner vibes. So after Molly left, I took a long, hot shower.
borrowed one of Ross's old hoodies. Yeah, I know. But it smelled like comfort. And then I drove back to the apartment. On the way there, I practiced every word in my head. I told myself, don't yell, don't cry, just get through it and get answers. When I pulled into the lot and saw Steve's truck, my stomach twisted hard. He was supposed to be at work. I climbed the stairs, unlocked the door, and there he was, sitting on the couch in sweats, unshaven, surrounded by wedding planning binders I had spent months organizing. Beans was curled up beside him like he was trying to be the emotional support animal for both of us. Steve looked up like he was relieved to see me, which only pissed me off more. I asked, "Why aren't you at work?" And he said, "Took personal time. I've been going through all of this, trying to figure out how I messed it up so badly." I didn't sit. I stood near the door, arms crossed. I said, "Looking at binders won't fix what you said about me." That's when the talk began. He said, "I'm sorry for the bar thing. It was inexcusable. I didn't even mean it." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then why the hell would you say it?" His answer? "I was trying to look cool in front of the guys." Cool. Like trashing your fiancé to impress some dudes makes you some kind of hero. It only made me angrier. I reminded him of what he'd said at dinner, even before the bar. The part where he looked me in the eye, completely sober, and said he wasn't sure if he was ready for all this. I said, "You weren't drunk then, so what was that about?" He sighed and admitted he was overwhelmed. Between a project at work falling behind, Brent constantly going on about how marriage ruins lives, and stress over the wedding budget. He said everything was just too much. But instead of coming to me with all of that, he kept it buried until it blew up in the worst way possible. Then he dropped something I hadn't expected. He started talking about his dad. Steve never brought up his father. All I knew was that the guy had bailed when Steve was 12, had an affair with some coworker, packed up, moved to Arizona, started a new family. Every time I asked about it, Steve would just shrug and say, "It didn't really affect me." But now, sitting there with his shoulders slumped and his eyes glassy, he said, "I'm scared I'm wired like him, that there's something broken in me I can't fix." I told him, "You're not your dad, Steve. Genetics don't make your choices. You do." But he just looked at me and said, "How can I promise forever when I don't even believe forever exists?" That one hit deep. I asked, "Have you talked to anyone about this? About any of it?" He hesitated, then said, "I've been talking to Kyler, just a little, since he joined the company. He's been through stuff too." It made sense. Kyler knew more than he let on. That's probably why he reached out after the bar night. He'd seen it coming. Then I asked the big one, "What have you actually been feeling, Steve? I want the truth." He looked down and said quietly, "Scared, overwhelmed. I love you, but I keep thinking about how my parents looked happy, until suddenly they weren't. I'm terrified of doing that to you." I asked why he didn't just tell me this sooner. He said, "Because I was afraid you'd think I didn't love you enough." The irony of that almost made me laugh, because by hiding all this, he created exactly what he was afraid of. Then I asked the question that had been burning in my chest since all of this started. Was it marriage that freaked you out, or was it the idea of marrying me? He didn't answer right away. And that pause, that silence told me more than words ever could. He finally admitted it. That part of him had been wondering if we were even right for each other in the long run. And honestly, that hurt more than the bar comment. 5 years together, and he still didn't know? I pressed him. What changed? He said, "We've both changed.
You used to be spontaneous, and now everything's a schedule. I used to dream about starting my own company, and I just let that die. I told him, change is normal. That's what people do when they grow up. We're not in our early 20s anymore. But he wasn't convinced. He said, yeah, but did we grow together or just grow apart? By that point, I felt completely drained, emotionally wrecked. I told him, I need time. I need space. Between the crap you pulled at the bar, all of this doubt you've been hiding, and now this, I can't even think straight. He didn't fight me on that. He just nodded, then quietly said, I still want to work through this. I'll do therapy, couples counseling, whatever it takes. But I had already made up my mind. I needed out of that apartment, at least for a while. As I was packing up more clothes, Steve pointed at my phone. It's been buzzing. Think your mom called a few times? I grabbed it and saw 3 missed calls from Mel.
My stomach flipped. In the middle of all this chaos, I'd completely forgotten I was supposed to meet her for coffee that morning. When I told Steve, his whole demeanor shifted. At first, he looked confused, then suddenly nervous. His face went pale, like bone white. He wouldn't look at me. I asked, what did you say to her? Why was she crying yesterday when she called me? He muttered, we talked. I told her about the fight, my doubts, that's all. But his eyes gave it away. He was dodging something. I pushed harder. What did you tell her, Steve? He rubbed his hands over his face and said, it's not my place to explain. You should hear it from her. That set off every alarm in my body. I walked out of the room and immediately called Mel back. She picked up on the first ring. I was worried, she said. You didn't show. I know, I'm sorry, I said. I've been here talking to Steve. The silence on her end was deafening. Then she said, we need to talk. I can meet you in 30 minutes. There was something in her voice, clipped, off, that made my skin crawl. When I went back to the bedroom and told Steve I was going to meet her, he just looked at me with that same mix of guilt and resignation. He said, there's something I should have told you myself. I'll be gone when you get back, if that's what you want. I packed a week's worth of clothes, shoved my toiletries and laptop into my duffel, and didn't say another word. As I reached the door, Steve looked at me and said, I love you. I didn't even blink. I just said, sometimes love isn't enough. On the way to meet Mel, my phone rang. It was Jess, Steve's sister. She sounded worried. What's going on between you and Steve? She asked. Brent mentioned something about that bar night, and Steve's not answering my texts. Mom's upset too. I told her I was on my way to meet Mel, and there was this pause, like she'd swallowed something sharp. Then she asked, is this about Irene? That name hit me like a gut punch. What about Irene? I asked, frozen. Jess immediately backtracked. I shouldn't have said anything. Just talk to Mom, okay? I pushed for more, but she wouldn't say another word. By the time I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot, my hands were shaking. Through the window, I spotted Mel sitting alone at a corner booth, eyes red and swollen, like she'd been crying for days. Right before I walked in, my phone buzzed with a message from Steve. Whatever my mom tells you, please know that I love you. I was scared. I made mistakes. I understand if you can't forgive me. I didn't respond. I just slid the phone into my pocket, took a breath, and walked inside. Now I'm writing this from Molly's apartment, crashed on her pull-out couch. I couldn't bring myself to go back to Ross's place, and there was no way in hell I was stepping foot back into that apartment with Steve. Molly's cat Pepper has been silently judging me while I cry into cereal at 2 a.m., but she's still better company than the guy I almost married. So, the meeting with Mel.
The coffee shop was packed. Apparently, a local community college had just let out, and every table was filled with students and laptops. But somehow, Mel had claimed a booth in the back, the kind with high walls that gave the illusion of privacy, even when people were packed around you. She looked nothing like the polished woman I saw at our last family dinner. Her perfectly styled bob was limp and uneven, and for the first time since I met her, she had no makeup on. Not even mascara, not even lipstick. In 5 years, I had never seen Mel barefaced. And yet, here she was, raw, tired, and clearly carrying something heavy. I had no idea what she was about to say, but every instinct in me knew one thing. It was going to wreck me. Mel's not the kind of woman who shows up looking undone. She's not vain, it's just her way. Like how some people can't start their day without caffeine. Seeing her sitting there without a lick of makeup, hair a little flat, eyes red and puffy, it threw me. When I walked in, she stood and gave me a hug. She smelled like lavender dryer sheets, the kind she always uses. I ordered a plain black coffee, even though I desperately wanted something sweet and ridiculous, with caramel and whipped cream. It just didn't feel right for this kind of conversation. We barely got past the small talk before she leaned in and said, "Steve called me Sunday night. He was a mess." She said his fears about commitment and turning into his father were real, sure. But there was something else, something more immediate. "It's Irene," she said quietly. I froze. "What about Irene?"
Mel hesitated, then looked down. He has feelings for her. It's not physical, at least that's what he told me, but emotionally, he's crossed a line. My heart dropped. Irene, the project coordinator, the woman Steve had only ever mentioned in passing. I remembered meeting her once at the company's holiday party. Now everything clicked. The constant texting, the sudden coldness, the way he practically lived at work. I asked, "Why are you telling me this and not protecting him?" Mel's eyes welled up. "Because I lived this already." Before Steve's dad left, he did the same thing. Started fights. Pulled away. I didn't see it then. I see it now. And I won't let him lie his way out of this while you're in the dark. Mel didn't want to see it happen again. Someone she cared about being left in the dark while the man they loved took the coward's way out. That bar comment, it wasn't just drunken trash talk. It was sabotage. Subconscious or not, Steve had been laying landmines to blow up the relationship, so he wouldn't have to be the one to end it. We sat there for over an hour. Mel opened up about her own marriage, how she'd tried to fix it even after discovering the affair, how she kept blaming herself for not being enough. The whole thing felt raw, painful, honest. Before I left, we stood in the parking lot, and she said something that stuck with me ever since. She said, "The hardest lesson I learned is that you can't make someone choose you. They either do or they don't. And anything in between, it's just dragging out the inevitable." After she drove off, I sat in my car, staring at my phone. There were 3 unread texts from Steve, all variations of the same tired script. "I'm sorry. I love you. Please let me explain. Not one word about Irene. Still hiding behind half-truths. I didn't reply. I called Molly instead and asked if I could crash at her place. She didn't even hesitate. Just said, "Couch is ready. I'll grab dinner on my way." That's the kind of friend you want when your whole world's imploding. Later that night, I finally texted Steve. "I know about Irene. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to tell me everything. I'll be picking up more of my stuff tomorrow while you're at work." Then I blocked his number. Not forever, just for the night. I needed silence. No excuses, no guilt tripping, just peace. On the drive to Molly's, Jess called. She'd overheard Steve and Brent talking about Irene last week. She told him to be honest with me after the weekend. Clearly, he didn't. What caught me off guard was how firmly she stood by me. She's his sister. But in that moment, she made it clear who she thought was in the wrong. And honestly, that meant everything. I was scared that losing Steve meant losing everyone else too. His mom, his sister. They weren't just his anymore. They had become my people, my second family. And now it felt like all of it was slipping away. That's why Molly's apartment was the perfect place to land that night. No pressure, no awkward silence, no questions. Just space to breathe. We sat on her living room floor, eating takeout straight from the containers. Her coffee table was buried in papers from her online class. Some baking competition was playing in the background, but neither of us paid much attention. It was just white noise, the kind that makes you feel like maybe things aren't totally falling apart. After Molly went to bed, I stayed up alone with my thoughts and my phone. 5 years of photos with Steve, beach trips, birthdays, those goofy selfies we used to take in the kitchen when we cooked together. Our engagement pics showed two people who looked like they had it all figured out. But I could see it now, all the cracks I missed. I was mentally planning my next move. I'd go back while Steve was at work, pack more of my stuff, maybe talk to the landlord about the lease. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Ellen, this is Irene. I know you blocked Steve. Can we talk tomorrow, just us? There's more you should know." I stared at the screen, heart racing. What else could there possibly be? And why would she want to tell me herself? I waited a long time, then finally typed, "Where and when?" If Irene had really been having some secret emotional affair with my fiancé, she didn't act like it. She looked anything but confident. She kept fidgeting with her coffee cup, barely made eye contact, and looked like she wanted to be anywhere but across from me. Then came the two bombshells. First, she said she had no idea Steve had feelings for her until Brent casually brought it up last week. According to Irene, they'd worked on a big project together and occasionally texted after hours about work stuff. Timelines, updates, even the occasional meme. But nothing flirty, nothing even close to inappropriate. She even showed me the texts. They were boring, corporate, dry.
She wasn't flirting. She wasn't leading him on. And to top it off, she had a boyfriend. Someone she'd been dating for 3 years who sometimes tagged along when their work crew met up for drinks. The second revelation was worse. Brent had apparently been stirring the pot on purpose. Irene overheard him at work, encouraging Steve to explore his options before tying himself down, even name-dropping her as someone who got Steve better than I ever could. She said Brent had been planting doubts in Steve's head for weeks, telling everyone at work that Steve had cold feet, joking about how he was already married and losing his freedom. By the end of that meeting, I didn't feel angry. I felt weirdly calm. Irene wasn't the villain I'd imagined her to be. She was just collateral damage, caught between Steve's weakness and Brent's manipulative crap. Before we left, she said something I'll never forget. "You seem like someone who knows their worth. Don't let anyone make you question it." That sentence lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about me and Steve anymore. It was about Brent, about Steve's broken family history, and about me, figuring out where the hell I stood in all of it. I texted Jess and asked if she could help set up a family meeting. Her place. Neutral ground. I wasn't ready to be alone in a room with Steve yet. She didn't hesitate, said she'd handle it. So yesterday, we all met at Jess's apartment. Cozy, small, but private. She ordered food from that little Italian place nearby. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. Mel showed up first, then Brent, who Jess insisted attend, and finally, Steve, looking like he hadn't slept in days.
The first 20 minutes were pure agony. We made weird small talk about the weather, Jess's new coffee table, anything but the thing we were really there for. The tension was so thick, it could have eaten the pasta off our plates. Finally, Mel put her fork down and said, "We're not here for a dinner party. We're here to deal with this." And just like that, everything cracked open. I laid out everything I'd learned from Irene, keeping my eyes on Brent the whole time. Watching his face shift from confused to defensive said more than his words ever could. He tried to cut in, claimed he was just looking out for his friend, but Jess shut him down without hesitation. Steve sat there in silence, picking at his pasta like it might save him. When someone finally asked him directly, he admitted that Irene had just been kind, that he was the one who twisted it into something more because he was terrified of turning into his father. Mel flinched hard at that. When I brought up the bar comment, Steve looked like he wanted to crawl into the floor. He said it had nothing to do with Irene. He called himself a coward. Said Brent had been ragging on him for being whipped, and instead of standing up for me, for us, he threw out that awful line to look cool. According to him, it was never about how you looked. Brent tried to wave it off. Just guy talk. Jess snapped, "You two were supposed to get married in 3 months." That hit me like a punch. Invitations were sent, deposits locked in. My wedding dress was still hanging in Molly's closet, waiting for one last fitting. I stared down at my plate and said quietly, "I don't think this wedding's happening anymore." The room froze.
Steve tried to speak. I stopped him. I told them I'd spent the last week combing through the wreckage, trying to figure out how we even got here. And it wasn't just about Irene, or that one stupid joke, or even Brent whispering poison in his ear. It was Steve not being honest with me, or with himself. I told them how I'd made excuses for his distance, his disinterest, his late nights. I didn't want to see it, because seeing it meant accepting it. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. "I deserve someone who's sure about me," I said. "Someone who doesn't need a damn intervention to realize how they feel." Brent muttered something snide about me being dramatic, which earned a double shut up from both Mel and Jess. Steve insisted he still loved me. He just didn't want to mess everything up. "You already did," I told him. The conversation dragged on for hours. There were tears, raised voices, especially between Jess and Brent. Old wounds reopened, new ones bled out on the table. By midnight, we were drained. And it was clear. The wedding was off. 5 years, over. No screaming, no slam doors. Just done. It wasn't a fight.
It wasn't some dramatic explosion, just a quiet mutual understanding that something fundamental had broken. Maybe it was trust. Maybe more than that. And maybe one day it could be repaired, but definitely not in time for an October wedding. Not with Irene still working at Steve's office. Not with that stupid bar comment still ringing in the back of my head every time I looked at him. Jess drove me back to Molly's place afterward. She kept reassuring me that none of this changed how she or Mel felt about me. "You're still family," she said, "no matter what happens with Steve." When I got back, the apartment was dark. I sat on the pull-out couch, letting everything hit me. 5 years, gone. Wedding, canceled. Future, a total blank. I didn't even cry right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started typing in the Notes app. Call venue, cancel catering, return the ring, contact guests, move out, update relationship status. It was past 2 a.m. when Molly shuffled out of her bedroom, rubbing her eyes. She sat next to me, didn't ask anything, just wrapped her arm around my shoulders. We sat like that until sunrise, not speaking, just breathing in the strangeness of it all. In the morning, I woke up to a text from Steve. "Can we meet, talk about the apartment, the lease, our stuff?" So adult. So final. Ross had messaged too, asking when he should swing by to help me start packing. And of course, there was a text from my mom. Somehow she'd heard through the family grapevine. She wanted to know if she should cancel her flight. I caught myself twisting the engagement ring again. I hadn't even realized I was doing it. Simple, round diamond, white gold band. Clean. Classic. Just like Steve always said our relationship was. That irony burned. I called the venue. The coordinator was kind but firm. The deposit was gone. $8,000. Money we'd scraped together over a year of skipping vacations and splitting entrees on date nights. Jess texted to say she might have found a photographer willing to transfer the credit to another event. Mel offered to call some of the extended family to handle the awkward cancellations. Little acts of kindness in the middle of a mess. Brent, predictably, sent a half-assed message about how things happen for a reason and you'll find someone better. I didn't even reply. Just deleted it. Irene sent a short note, too. Said she was sorry for how things turned out, reassured me again that nothing ever happened between them. And for some reason, I actually believed her. Strange as it sounds, Irene just seems like collateral damage. A convenient projection for Steve's fears and Brent's constant stirring. She didn't ask for any of this. What's hardest now isn't even the heartbreak. It's the small, stupid reminders of what we were supposed to have. The wedding binder's still buried in the bottom of my tote bag. There's a shared Spotify playlist we'd made for the reception. I keep skipping past it like it's haunted. The honeymoon folder on my laptop, still there, full of bookmarked Airbnbs and beach resorts that don't mean anything anymore. Molly told me to take a mental health day, but I went into work instead. Sitting at home overthinking, it felt worse than answering insurance calls and scanning forms. My coworkers have either been super respectful or totally clueless. No one said anything about the missing ring, no side glances, no weird questions, just quiet normalcy. I'm grateful for that. I'm meeting Steve tomorrow at a coffee shop. Just the two of us, to exchange keys and talk logistics. He's agreed to move out, my name's on the lease, and crash at his cousin's for a while. It's just one more step in the slow, boring business of tearing a life apart. I still catch myself thinking, is this real? Last month we were taste testing cake samples and fighting over the best first dance song. Now we're divvying up kitchen gadgets and negotiating who keeps the damn PlayStation.
Something Mel said at dinner keeps circling in my head. Endings are rarely clean. They're messy and painful and awkward. And she'd know. She survived the same kind of heartbreak, raised 2 kids alone, built something solid out of the rubble. You'd never know now that she went through hell to get here.
Maybe that's the hope I need to hold on to. Tomorrow, I'll deal with rent and utilities. Next week, I'll start looking for a new place. The rest, blurry, but at least it's still out there. Jess just texted me asking if I want to grab coffee this weekend. She mentioned a friend of their family, an older guy named Kenzo, has a cabin I could borrow if I need to clear my head. The offer feels tempting, a solo escape to somewhere quiet. No noise, no reminders. But another part of me knows I need to stay close. To Molly, with her calm, no-nonsense warmth. To Ross, who's already offered to help me move. To Mel and Jess, with all their complicated, loyal love. One thing's for sure, I won't be opening that wedding countdown app again. I won't be pinning centerpieces or trying out a new signature with Steve's last name. That version of my life is gone. And while I have no clue what comes next, for the first time, I believe something good might. It's been 3 months since that dinner, the one where everything finally came undone. 3 months of slowly piecing myself back together in ways I didn't think I'd have to. Some of you have messaged asking for an update, so here it is. The good, the bad, and the stuff I never saw coming. Let's start with the practical side. Steve moved out of our shared apartment a week after we called it quits. Ross and Molly helped me pack up his stuff while he was at work. We labeled everything and left it neatly in the living room. It felt surreal, dividing 5 years of a life into his and mine. The coffee machine I got him for his birthday, the throw blanket from that little mountain town we visited, the framed pictures lining the walls. After he picked up his things, the place felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors leave. I stayed 2 more weeks before I asked the lease manager if I could break the contract. It cost me an extra month's rent, but it was worth every cent to stop breathing in memories every time I walked through the door. Finding a new place wasn't easy. The rental market is brutal. And my budget, solo now, didn't stretch like it used to. I ended up in a smaller 1-bedroom across town. It's not fancy, but it has a tiny balcony. I started growing herbs in cheap plastic pots from the dollar store. The basil keeps dying, but the mint is thriving. I've decided that's symbolic. Finances have been a shift. Everything we used to split, car insurance, Netflix, groceries, it all falls on me now. I've become that person who clips coupons, tracks spending in a spreadsheet, and debates whether takeout is worth the emotional damage. Grown-up things I didn't think I'd be learning at 29. The vendors were surprisingly kind. The venue kept the deposit, but the coordinator sent a really heartfelt email. The florist refunded half, even though their policy says no refunds. The DJ gave me his brother's number. Apparently, he's a therapist. The engagement ring is still in its original box, tucked into my dresser. Steve said I should keep it or sell it. He thought it'd be bad karma if he took it back. I haven't decided what to do with it. Some days, I forget it's there. Other days, I find myself opening the box just to stare at it. Funny how something so small could carry so many heavy promises.
Social media was its own flavor of hell. I waited 2 weeks before updating my relationship status. Did it quietly, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The flood came anyway. What happened? Texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Distant relatives offering prayers. Former classmates sliding into my DRs like we were close. I posted something short and vague. Mutual decision, please respect privacy. Then tossed my phone across the couch and didn't look at it for hours. A few days later, I uploaded one photo, my new apartment keys, captioned it, "New Beginnings." Fewer likes than the engagement announcement, but it felt real. As for Steve, we've only spoken a few times since the breakup. Just practical stuff. A bill in the wrong name, a package sent to the old address, returning his sister's air fryer. Every exchange has been civil but stiff, like two strangers making polite small talk in an elevator. He's still at the same job, still friends with Brent, though Jess says that's getting rocky. He's still living with his cousin. And from what the grapevine, aka Jess, tells me, things with Irene have gotten awkward. Really awkward. Can't say I'm surprised. She ended up asking for a transfer. Ever since she found out the full story, Irene has been distant with Steve. Cold, even. I don't blame her. The biggest surprise came last month. Out of nowhere, Steve texted me. He wanted to meet. We hadn't seen each other in person since the day we handed over keys. A part of me was curious, not hopeful, just curious. So we met at a coffee shop near my new place. Neutral ground, plenty of witnesses, just like Molly half-jokingly recommended. He looked different, thinner, tired. Dark circles under his eyes, wearing a button-down I didn't recognize. The first 10 minutes were painfully awkward. Weather, work, nothing real.
Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a journal. "I've been seeing someone," he said. My stomach clenched for half a second, until he clarified. "A therapist. This is from one of our sessions, reflections, stuff I'm trying to unpack." He said he'd been working through his relationship with his dad, the toxic dynamic with Brent, and most of all, the way he treated me. He didn't ask for anything. No apology, no request to come back. He just said, "I should have done this a long time ago. Maybe it would have changed things." It was the most self-aware I've ever seen him, and weirdly, I hoped it helps. Not for me, that chapter's done, but because living with that much buried trauma has to be exhausting. Right before we left, he said, "I heard you're still close with my mom and Jess." I nodded. "I'm glad. They need good people around them." That's been the strangest part of all this, keeping ties with the family, even while I cut the cord with him completely. But honestly, it feels right. Mel texts me every week, usually just funny memes or little updates about how her garden's doing. Jess and I still get breakfast every other Sunday at this low-key diner halfway between our apartments. They've been both incredibly respectful. They don't push, they don't bring up Steve unless I do. They've kept every boundary I've asked for, and that kind of care means more than I can explain. As for me, I wish I could say I've had some massive life-changing awakening, like I walked through the fire and came out transformed. But the truth is messier than that.
Some days I feel free, genuinely relieved that I didn't marry someone who could look me in the eye and still betray me. Other days, when my hot water heater acts up, or I can't reach something on the top shelf, something Steve used to grab for me without being asked, I miss the small comforts, the practical partnership. I've started therapy, too. Not just because of the breakup, but because it made me realize how many pieces of myself I chipped away over time to keep him comfortable. How many red flags I ignored because they showed up wrapped in routine. My therapist has been helping me reclaim parts of myself I let go of. I started hiking again on Saturday mornings, something I loved, but stopped doing because Steve hated early wake-ups on weekends. Dating again? Not even close. Some coworkers keep hinting about a great guy they want to introduce me to, but I'm just not there. Maybe in a few months, maybe not. I'm still learning how to enjoy my own company. The most unexpected part came from what should have been the most depressing task: canceling our honeymoon. It was a 10-day trip to the coast, a cozy little cottage overlooking the water. Non-refundable, of course. For weeks, I ignored the calendar alerts, couldn't even face it. Then Molly said, "You should go, alone." I laughed. It sounded like the start of some indie sad girl movie. But then it clicked. I could go, wake up when I want, explore what I want, read a whole damn book in one sitting if I feel like it. So, that's what I'm doing. I packed 3 paperbacks, downloaded way too many podcasts, and even bought a swimsuit that's actually comfortable. Not sexy, not for someone else, just for me. My mom thinks I've lost it. Ross offered to come with me for a few days. I said no. Jess joked I should download a dating app while I'm there. I said maybe, but probably not. I don't know what I'll find out there. Maybe clarity. Maybe just peace. Probably some sunburn, let's be real. I'm terrible with sunscreen.
The other day, I was at the grocery store when our song came on over the speakers. 3 months ago, it would have wrecked me. I would have been hiding in the freezer aisle, holding back tears. This time, it just stung a little, like poking a bruise that's mostly healed. It's not perfect, but it's progress. I don't have it all figured out. My new shower has a mind of its own when it comes to hot water. I killed another basil plant yesterday, and sometimes I still instinctively reached for my phone to text Steve about something funny before remembering we don't do that anymore.